So I am going to get started, just letting everyone know before we start that this is being recorded. My name is Victoria Moore. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am one of the admission counselors at Olin College of Engineering. Us and the panelists are so excited to talk to you tonight about student affairs and everything revolving around student affairs at Olin. Just to let you know, the way this program works is that about half of the time, or a little less than half the time, will be dedicated to the panelists speaking about themselves and their role at Olin and what they do here and kind of what that encompasses. The rest of the time will be dedicated to Q&A. So I encourage you, starting right now and while the presenters are speaking, to put your questions in the Q&A box so that we can get right on to answering them once we hit the Q&A portion. So I'm actually gonna let the panelists start to introduce themselves and talk, starting with Beth.
Hello, everybody. My name is Beth Gran Petro. I'm the Director of Wellness at Olin College. I have been at Olin for about 2 years now. And my job within Student Affairs and Resources is to do several different things. Like all of us, you'll find. I am responsible for our health and counseling services, which are done through Babson College, which is adjacent to our campus. And then we work with several different counselors in the community to provide mental health services for our students. I also do educational programming for students about a variety of health and wellness topics. I do some one-on-one meetings with students who might need to ask questions about all kinds of different things, whether or not they need counseling, are they having trouble sleeping, having issues with maybe supporting a friend on campus, or not sure what to eat in the dining hall, or all kinds of different things. And also I do some assessment on campus, which means that from time to time, I get in touch with students and ask them to tell me things about their health behaviors and things that they, are interested in, so that we can make sure that we are providing the right resources and programs and supports for our students. And that's kind of a picture of what I do, I guess I would say. I will hand it over to Courtney now.
Thanks, Beth. So my name is Courtney Beach, she, her pronouns. I am the International Programs Coordinator within the STAR office. And so what that means, I work with incoming international students doing immigration advising. Also, we have exchange students on campus each semester, not this year, but in the future, again, we will. And then also I run the study abroad programs. And so how study abroad works at Olin, we have some pre-approved programs, partnerships with a handful of different providers that takes our students all over the world. So many different options to choose from. Most students study abroad in their junior year, and they mainly take arts, humanities, and social science courses when they're abroad. They tend to leave the engineering courses to Olin, because that's why they're coming to Olin, to really get the hands-on experience with engineering. And the neat thing about study abroad at Olin is that students pay Olin tuition to study abroad, which means that students are still eligible for their Olin scholarships and their financial aid. So they can take their financial aid package abroad with them. So there's no real difference in pay if students are wishing to study abroad. And students work really closely with their faculty advisors to set up when the best time for them to study abroad is, what courses that they should take abroad. And there's a short approval process that students go through with me in order to plan that study abroad. And students start planning as early as their first semester, first year. I'm already starting to meet with some of our first year students to plan for their junior year abroad. And I'll hand it over to the wonderful Seth.
Hi, my name is Seth Hodge, and I am the Associate Dean of Students at Olin. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I am going on 2 years this January at Olin, so I've also been here a fairly short time, but really excited to be a part of Olin. In my position, I work regularly with Beth and Courtney in both of their areas, but I also oversee housing, residential life, student activities, and student orientation programs on the college. I also work concurrently with our public safety office and working on student safety issues and all of those things. So for me, kind of anything that relates to your life living on campus touches the work that I do in some way, shape, or form. So I've got a great team of folks I work with to do all of those things. But I'm happy to answer questions about any of those areas, whether it be what living on campus is like, or dining plans, or safety, or any of those kind of things. And I'm going to pass it on to Stephanie.
Thank you. Hi, y'all. My name is Stephanie, she, her, hers pronouns, and I am both the Title IX coordinator and the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion here on campus. So as the Title IX coordinator, I work with students, staff, and faculty to try to ensure as safe a campus as possible by being able to receive information about anything that might be related to our federal Title IX statute, to then train our faculty, staff, and students on how to respond to such issues, and to work with our partners at Babson and Wellesley College as well. As the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I engage in programming for our student body, anything from our various affinity and heritages months. Like right now, we are finishing up Latinx Heritage Month, to bringing in speakers, to hosting listening sessions, and trying to make the campus a place of belonging and space for every student who is on campus. So I will turn it back over to Victoria.
Hi, so we have a great question or two, and I encourage everyone to continue to ask questions. This was just a really brief overview of what each of these wonderful panelists do, and there's a lot to be asked of them, so I encourage you to keep asking questions. So the first question we have is, what makes the connection between staff and students unique at Olin? And maybe if everyone could speak to that a little bit.
I can start. I think that what's so unique about Olin is that it's a small campus, so that means that we know who every student is. So I have students that drop by my office multiple times in a semester, and I've worked at larger universities, and I don't even know who students are. So I really think it's a special place because you're going to know who the director of wellness is. You're like, oh yeah, let's go talk to Beth. We know exactly what she does. You're going to know if you want to do some programming for something, like Stephanie can be there to help you, and you know who Stephanie is because you see her on campus. And so I think that's really unique, and you don't find that at every school.
I agree with everything Courtney said, and I think that this is not exactly about the connection between staff and students, but the connection amongst people in the community in general. Is that the size of the college means truly that not only do we kind of know who every student is, but it's easy to kind of know who everyone is, or close to everyone. And I think that I've also worked at very big universities and also a couple of other small colleges, although not any as small as Olin. And I think the perk of the small colleges always is that you do get to know who people are. It is a very different way of doing business on campus, even as a student, to be able to know like people's faces and to be able to just say, I feel comfortable stopping in and asking this person a question, in the time when we are in our offices, and you can do that in person. Very different from what it might be like at a larger place. And I think it does have the sort of vibe of, a very small town or, just there's people that you'll get to know being on campus that in a larger place you might not necessarily have those kind of relationships with. And I also think that, the type of student that Olin attracts and the type of college that it is means that there is more of an attitude toward things that is kind of collaborative and innovative, and people want to try new things and work together on them. And I think that makes for a very different kind of relationship between students and staff, students and faculty, et cetera, than at most places.
I'm just going to echo the things that they were saying. I would also point out, I think for many of us, it's the reason that we also come to Olin, not just the reason the students come to Olin. You know, in a position like mine, it is most people who have my title at other schools would not know as many students by face and name as I do. That doesn't make me any specialer. It just means that I get to be on the ground, and I just use the word specialer. I get to be on the ground, and I get to be up front, and I get to meet people as they move in and talk to folks and be part of orientation programming with our students. And that's something that is amazing. And it's why a lot of us are at Olin. Just like the reason a lot of students would come to Olin is we want to be a part of a student's development and help them to really grow throughout their 4 years at Olin and be a part of that. It means that they also know us. And so if somebody has a question about something, you're not sending an email to this faceless name that is on a website. You're popping by one of our offices and chatting with us, or you're maybe shooting us an email, but you're going to get a response that's more direct as opposed to something that's canned, because you're going to know who the people are that you're talking to and reaching out to.
Wonderful. Thanks for all those answers. So we have a popular question regarding what accommodations does Olin offer for neurodiverse students, those with Asperger's, dyslexia, dysgraphia, ADHD, learning differences, things like that. I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
I can jump into that a little bit. So our accommodations are across the board. So whether it be academic accommodations or accommodations in your living situation, we really do look at each person as an individual rather than having a standard cookie cutter for if you are diagnosed in this way, you get this accommodation. Any student who has a need for an accommodation will work with Adhd, who does our disability accommodations on campus, and will work with Adhd to get both suggestions from their doctor, their prescribing doctor, of what their needs are, and then we'll work together with Adhd to meet those accommodations. Adhd will work with different folks depending on what kind of accommodations you're looking for. So for example, if it's a housing related accommodation, then I would be pulled into the conversation with that student and with Adhd, and we will talk about what their needs are and what our facilities that exist are and how we can do the best we can do for each person individually.
Does anyone else want to speak to that point, or does that cover it all? Covers it? Okay. What places, this is directed towards Courtney, I think, what places have students studied abroad?
Yeah, so the list is very extensive. Olin students tend to choose pretty non-traditional locations to study abroad. So basically, if there's a study abroad program there that one of our approved providers has, we will allow you to go there as long as it's safe and they allow U.S. citizens to go. But I did pull up a list of where students were last year that I'm just going to read off quickly to you. And not all of them, but kind of more the unique ones. Ireland, Japan, Iceland, Switzerland, Denmark, Ecuador and the Galapagos, Spain, Tanzania, Costa Rica, Australia, Jordan, Germany. And so that was all spring 2020. And there's more. There's definitely more. I just pulled up the most recent ones that I had.
It's a good range of places. So we had a great question. How I muted myself briefly. I'm so good at Zoom. You would think doing this every night, I'd be better at it. Anyways, how do you as staff help minority students and women identifying students handle imposter syndrome?
Yeah, you're not alone in that, Victoria. I have issues with muting and unmuting myself as well. You would think by now we'd have it together, but we don't. Okay. I think there are several ways that we do this intentionally, programmatically, and then also, as we've been talking about, informally, just because we are an intimate community. So I and my office and all of us who do inclusion and belonging work. We do intentional programming. We also do individual check-ins with students to talk about the ways that we all might feel an imposter syndrome, no matter what our areas of intersectionality are. We have a really strong faculty core as well who have, done this work and are very responsive to the students in their classes. And as I said, there's also the informal matters of actively, like as you build community, you grow to understand that a lot more of your peers and your friends will feel similarly than feel dissimilarly. And so we attempt through whatever we do, be it through, as I said, formal education programs, activities, through the actual curriculum, and through being a tight-knit community, that we try to be open to hearing about this and helping people like work through it. I will say a piece of that, of course, is I need to know how people feel like sooner rather than later. There are definitely like webinars and workshops that we have that we can talk about, but the open door is that like I want to hear from you all, to hear how you're feeling and to validate how you're feeling, and then see how we can plan together to try to like overcome some of those feelings. But it's also very natural. The fortunate thing about Olin is that as far as sex/gender, we have great numbers. So some students might not necessarily feel something around being woman identified that they might on larger campuses or other programs. But, it is true that, if you are of an ethnic minority, you might feel some isolation. And there are people here who understand that. And there are people here who you can reach out to, faculty, staff, and other students, our upper division students, who will be happy to support you.
Great, thank you. The next question we have is whether we require neuropsych testing within 1 year of admission. If anyone knows the answer, I know I don't.
We don't require it for all students. I'm not sure if it meant for all students or for an accommodation. Depending on what kind of accommodation students are looking for, different things will need to be updated. I would say contacting Adhd in Disability Services is really your best bet to know the most up-to-date ADA compliance recommendations. We follow ADA guidelines as far as doing accommodations. And so wherever they happen to be the year that is happening, we are following the most up-to-date guidelines.
Yeah, that student added that it was for those needing accommodation, so that answered it well. Wonderful. So we had someone comment that they were really impressed by the preferred name, pronouns, and gender identity boxes in the sign up for this meeting and other Olin events. Wondering, how does Olin support students who identify outside of the gender binary and or differently from their assigned gender at birth?
Stephanie, do you want to start or do you want me to? Okay, so I will say that's an area that we are working very hard and constantly growing. I know that currently we do, of course, has pronouns, not only in admissions, but at time of arrival. Our student handbook does list people's preferred pronouns. As far as other pieces of the puzzle, one of the biggest ones is, of course, housing. And so when students are coming in within the housing questionnaire, we ask students how they identify. And then we also give options for students. There's a whole section around gender identity. And so not only do we ask students how they identify, but we also ask them if there's anything they want to share. So if somebody is on a pathway or on a journey through a transition, and that's something they want to share with us, because they want to be sure they're getting a roommate who's more understanding of that transition and who's going to be more supportive. We give them a space to give us that information. We also give students the opportunity to let us know that they do stand as an ally within that. So we're not clustering people just because they're transitioning together, but that we're giving people roommates and matches of people who are going to be supportive to them regardless, and trying to find good support and good community in that way. Moving past that, we do have a number of student organizations around our LGBTQ community. A number of faculty and staff, myself included, are part of the community ourselves and are always upfront and letting students know who we are and being very visual about our representation and being a support system to our students on a regular basis. Does anybody else want to jump in with other bits and pieces of this?
I would say also just that those of us who are responsible for doing educational programming on campus, not all of our programming might be addressing gender identity or sexual orientation or any of those topics directly, but we do work to keep those in mind as we're planning programs and making sure that, if we're talking about a topic where that's relevant, where it often is, that we're considering all kinds of intersecting identities when we're talking about different things that are of interest to students. So I think that's another slightly less visible way sometimes that it's happening, but it's certainly something that we keep in mind.
And we also have educational components and training components that students, staff, and faculty also are responsible for taking and passing every year. And we also have specialty educational components and programs that happen periodically throughout the year as well.
Great, thanks. So question, I've heard about the Study Away program. This is directed towards you, Courtney. Is the financial side of this similar to the Study Abroad programs?
Sure. So at Olin, our study abroad programs are also called study away programs because we sometimes will approve programs within the US for students to study at for one semester. So it's a study away instead of a study abroad. So for example, this semester we have a student studying at the Rhode Island School of Design because they are doing engineering with design major, and there aren't enough courses at Olin to fit exactly what they are looking for. So we do approve these a little more rarely than we do the study abroad programs, just because we really want a study away you to be taking courses that cannot be offered, that you cannot get at either Olin, Wellesley, or Babson. But the financial part of it, yes, does work the same. So you still pay the Olin tuition, still be eligible for your Olin scholarship, and still be eligible for financial aid. Sometimes other schools in the US are more expensive. Their tuition is more expensive than Olin. So if there is a difference, if the school you are looking to go to does cost more than Olin's tuition, then you will have to pay the difference directly to the school.
Great, thank you. I encourage everyone to continue to ask questions. The questions so far have been wonderful, so definitely keep asking them, let them roll in. We want to talk. All our panelists want to talk to you. I am going to direct a question, I guess, starting with Seth. Could you talk a little bit, about dorms and residential life? Dorms is something I know from being on information sessions and tours. The dorming is something that comes up quite a bit in questions related to dorming.
Absolutely. So our first year housing, first of all, students at Olin do receive 4 years of housing. So we are one of the campuses that has a 4-year housing requirement. And that's because of the way we want our students to be a part of the community, fully ingrained in everything that's happening at all times. Part of housing at Olin is first year housing, and first year housing is in one of our buildings called West Hall, which is a traditional style to some degree residence hall. It is rooms that are off the hallway as opposed to a suite style. So it is a room that's off the hallway. Our rooms in there are all doubles, but have their own private bathrooms. So imagine a room that is similar to in size of a hotel room with a private bathroom, except it has 2 sets of student furniture in it. Our first year students live in first year hallways. So we do designate hallways to first year communities. So that way you get to know your cohort best. You have an opportunity to really live together in a shared community space, that you're getting to know each other, you're taking your classes together, and really bonding with your first year class in a lot of ways. Our residence halls all have common lounges in them, as well as study areas. And then they also have a shared kitchen. And then between the two buildings, we have some other shared space. So we have a fitness room, we have music practice rooms, and some different spaces like that that are more community-oriented spaces within the residential setting. We really like to think of our residence halls as your home away from home. So it's not just the place you sleep and study, but it's the place where you're going to socialize with your friends and play board games and have movie nights, and you're going to work out and you're going to learn to cook something new. It's really where you're going to learn all of the life skills that you're learning in college when you're outside of the classroom.
On a related note to that, we have a question about what the food plans are at Olin and what dining is like.
So Olin is unique in that we don't have a multitude of food plans. Our housing and dining is a one-cost housing and dining, and it's an all-you-can-eat plan. I will say I have, over my career, I have worked on a number of campuses, and I can say unequivocally Olin has the best dining of any of the schools I've ever worked at. We work with a local company called Rebecca's Cafe, which started as a restaurant and a local catering service. And we are their first school that is full-time Rebecca's Cafe. They do amazing meals, especially, we are a small setting, only about 350 students on campus. And so they're able to do things that other schools are not able to do because they're cooking real food, not just heating up frozen food. We really appreciate the food.
A little bit more specific of a question when it comes to dorming. What are the limitations for decorating a dorm room? Can they paint walls, hang pictures, lights, things like that?
Good questions. You cannot paint the walls, unfortunately. You can hang things, but we can't put nails in the walls. So we encourage students to use like 3M hooks, things like that. Unfortunately, we can't have lots of nails going in every year because just the upkeep of turning over that many rooms every year, if we're having to plaster, patch, and paint every year, is unfortunately unfeasible. But there are lots of ways to decorate your rooms. And I will say our students do phenomenal jobs at really making their rooms their own spaces. When you walk into the beginning of the year, every room looks exactly the same. And within 2 weeks, you walk in and every single room has such a distinctive look based on the way the furniture's been arranged and the things that have been hung on the walls and the way students have really made it their own space. And it really can be done.
Great. What are some of the most popular hangout areas on campus, would you say, from the staff perspective?
Well, it depends on the weather, obviously, but certainly in the nice weather, students love to hang out outside. You'll see students hanging out in the oval, which is the main kind of, on other campuses, what would be called a quad, but it's ovular, so it's an oval. The Great Lawn, which is kind of the expanse of grass down one level from the oval. There's also a segment of land that is very creatively called Parcel B, because I presume that's what it's called on like a blueprint somewhere. It doesn't have a prettier name yet, but that's kind of a little bit of a more wooded area where students like to take walks and that sort of thing. Olin also has a disc golf course on its campus. So if anyone's into that, or if you want to get into that one day when you come to Olin, you can do that. That's fun. Courtney's chuckling because she knows that during this pandemic time, my husband has decided he is into disc golf. And he's really gone whole hog and has played the Olin course before. So definitely outdoor stuff is a big deal when the weather is good for it. Seth, you might know more about like where students are hanging in the I mean, obviously lounges, but like what they're doing for the indoor hang.
Absolutely. in the res halls, we have a big lounge on every single floor. And so the lounges, depending on the year, tend to each take on a personality of their own. We usually have one that tends to be the one where people hang out and watch movies. We also have one where there's ping pong tables and things, so that is happening there. Every year, one of them tends to become the board game lounge, where people are always hanging out and playing board games and doing those kind of things. I will say the other areas that we have a lot of students spending time, in our campus center, we have an area with a couple of pool tables, and a lot of students will go down and shoot pool. And then the other place students really spend a lot of time on our campus is in the library and the dining hall. With it being an all-you-can-eat dining hall, you can really go in whenever you want. And it is kind of a social hub of the campus center. It's just a place that people hang out and chat and talk to each other. There's a big mezzanine in it that overlooks the rest of the hall. So if you want to talk with a couple friends in a little quieter space, there's a space up there. Our library is also by no means a traditional library. It is not a quiet library. There are a couple of quiet study rooms in the library, but the library itself is really a social hub on our campus. It's where students will spend time, they do programming, they do events, they just hang out, they read, they study, all of the things. There's also a maker space in the library, so people are in there building and playing and constructing and sewing and 3D printing and doing all kinds of things. So those tend to be some of our really big hangout spots.
Can students on campus have an emotional support animal?
With a medical diagnosed need and an approved accommodation. So they would have to get a diagnosed need from a doctor, and then it would have to meet the standards for an approved accommodation through ADA standards for a college campus.
So we had a question that has a couple different parts to it. I'm going to break it up. First, perhaps Stephanie, could you tell us more about diversity on campus?
That's such a big question. Okay, diversity on campus. The reason why I say it's a big question because I don't quite understand, like diversity could mean a lot of things. As I said, if we talk about like the gender breakdown, we could say it's a little over half women identified, a little less than half men identified, and then other genders and identities like make up that remaining 1% to 2%. If we're talking about like ethnic diversity within the student body, that is there are quite a few students who identify from Asian, Pacific Island, or South Asian communities, not as many who identify from African, Black, or Caribbean communities or from Latinx communities. But we have geographic diversity, right? So we literally have people from all over the country, other than times of COVID, all over the world who are here. And so coming to this college, as I said, if you're dealing with like approximately 350 students, there are some ways like people will find commonalities across differences. And then there are going to honestly be other times where people might feel more isolated from their home communities. And so this is why we're trying to build in the programming. This is why we have programs like the Sibs. This is why, we have our various student organizations who all try to work to foster community and belonging. I don't know if it was mentioned yet, but one of the student organizations is the Mix. And so this is an umbrella organization for students who identify with particular ethnic minorities. And it's a support group, it's a networking group, and it's a social group. And so they go to national conferences like NSBE, SHIP, and other conferences together. And they also, hang out when you're allowed to hang out on Sundays and, just chill and relax and kind of unwind. So if I had a little more, I could drill down a little more with you, but that's off the top.
Yeah, so if people want to ask even more specific questions about that topic, feel free because we can talk about that even more. Stephanie, you did mention what SIBs are. Do you want to explain what that is?
And the reason why I said no is because I'm actually going to hand that over to Seth.
Seth, yeah.
Yeah.
Our
Seth,
SIB,
want to explain?
sure. Our SIB program is something that's been going on at Olin for years. And so SIBs are, it's a program that we have that every year our first year students are identified. They'll fill out a form of interests and intended major and just things that they like to do in their free time. And we match them up with an upper class SIB, a sibling. And they're like their big SIB for not just for the year, for their future at Olin and Olin Connected. And the reason I say not just the year is because there are many SIB families. When you are a sophomore and you have a SIB of your own and you have your big SIB will also take your little SIB under their wing. And you will eventually meet alumni who are 4 SIB generations, 5 SIB generations up from you based on who they are. SIBs are something our students take very seriously, and they really take care of each other and care about their SIBs. It's a really good way for students to have kind of an upperclassman buddy from the moment they get on campus to really learn about campus a little more and, you know, find out how do you manage this as an engineering student here, and how do you work in that different way, and you know, where are the great places to eat off campus, and you know, where's the shortcut to the spaces in Babson College, which is right next door, that I'm going to go visit because that's where the health center is, and all the things like that.
Oh, and piggybacking off of Seth with speaking about Babson and other campuses, a lot of our clubs and organizations are part of the actual collective of Babson, Olin, and Wellesley. And so you will also have the opportunity to meet, interact, and get to know students from Wellesley College and Babson College. And that's also another really good way to form community outside of the immediate Olin community.
Yeah, that's a great point and a great thing to bring up. Thank you, Stephanie. We also have a broad question to tell us more about extracurricular activities. So a little bit about that portion of campus life, if anyone wants to tackle that.
Okay. So our students have a number of different clubs and organizations. There's ones that happen every year. We have teams where students will work on everything from building motorized vehicles to rocketry, things like that are more engineering based, but we also have things that are more social or more just interest based. We have a fire arts club where our students learn to juggle and manipulate flaming batons and ropes and things and do huge shows of that. You know, not something normal. We have a unicycle group, we have a theater arts club, and we also, as Stephanie mentioned, have a lot of collaborative clubs and organizations with Babson and Wellesley. So our students can pretty much find something to get involved with no matter what. We have less athletics on our campus than a lot of the bigger campuses, but we do have men's and women's soccer teams as well as ultimate frisbee. And then there are rock climbing groups on campus and things like that. There's a sailing club. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved. If there's something that you're interested in that doesn't exist yet, and you get a few other people together, come talk to us and we will see about ways of trying to make it happen. That is one of the benefits that you talked about earlier about the relationships with faculty and staff and students, is that you can come ask those questions and we can work with you to see what we can make happen.
Yeah, there's so many cool clubs. There was a club called Stuffed last year that popped up, and they made stuffed animals. Like at an activities fair, they just had a table and it was overflowing with all the stuffed animals that they had made over the course of the semester, because that became the thing they were into. So there's a range there of extracurriculars for sure. We have a really great question. What is the biggest thing you see freshmen struggle with? And also, what do upperclassmen struggle with on the flip side of that?
I'll start because struggle is my job a lot of the time. So yeah, I think a lot of what first year students at Olin struggle with is similar to what first year students at any college would struggle with. There is homesickness. There's the adjustment of, you know, changing from, you know, living where you live now with your family to living on campus, managing your own schedule, particularly in an environment like Olin where the classes and the way that things are done are quite different from not just high school, but even other colleges in a lot of ways. So I think those are the big first year struggles, but also and this counts for the upper class students too, it's a really small community that can be great in a lot of ways. It can be really awesome to be part of this tight-knit community, but I think also sometimes imposter syndrome is a real thing that has already come up in our conversation. And I think that it's really typical and normal for anyone adjusting to a new environment to sometimes feel lonely or sometimes feel like they don't fit in. And I sometimes worry that that is felt even more strongly at Olin because we talk so much about, oh, it's such a small community and everyone has a place and you're going to meet so many great people. And it has this weird, like, reverse psychology effect of having our students be like, but I feel lonely. How could this be? Like, I'm not supposed to feel that way at Olin. So I think that sometimes it's, you know, it's the same as everywhere else, but in a uniquely Olin flavor of trying to figure out, like, all right, I'm here now, and some of what I was thinking was going to happen or some of what I'm expecting isn't happening as fast as I thought it would or isn't happening the way I thought it would, and how do I adjust to that? But I think what's great about Olin is that there is so much support and there is so much, there are so many resources to help people figure out their place and figure out where they belong. I also want to echo or kind of call back to something Stephanie talked about, and Stephanie, please chime in as well. You know, there's a lot of really great work being done by our admissions team to recruit folks from all over with all different identities and all different experiences, but there are still going to be students for whom they're going to look around campus and be like, I am the only one, or there are only 2 other people who look like me, or 5 other people who look like me. Or, you know, they might be from a socioeconomic background that they don't feel is very strongly represented on campus. There's all kinds of ways where, you know, it can be a weird adjustment if you feel like you're very different from everyone on campus. And I don't say all this to, like, be scary. I'm trying more to just normalize the fact that I think everyone struggles a little bit with figuring out where they fit in, managing their time. Sorry, that was a very loud noise outside my window. Sorry, I got distracted. Managing their time and managing sort of how to decide what to do. And that's actually for first years and upper class students as well. A lot of the students I talk to are very overwhelmed and come to me because they're like, I'm not getting enough sleep. I'm so tired. I have too much to do. And when I talk to them, it's because they can't, like, narrow down their extracurriculars. It's not even like, oh, I have so much academic work to do. They literally are like, well, I'm in these 5 clubs and I have all the, you know, and they want to do everything. And there's so much to choose from that they have a hard time saying no to things. And I think that that's a struggle throughout people's time at Olin, but certainly in the first year, because it's exciting and you get there and there's just all these things you want to try and all these new people you want to hang out with.
Great answer. To sort of piggyback on what that discussion was, Beth, could you talk a little bit about mental health resources on campus and how that works?
Sure. So I sort of said this when I was doing my introduction and probably didn't explain it very well, but because of our size, we don't have our own health or counseling clinic on campus. So for health services, medical care, our students use the health center at Babson College, which is right next to us. For mental health services, we have several different mental health providers from the local community who work with our students. Usually on campus and off both. In our current situation, all of this is being done by telehealth. But we have a variety of folks who are able to meet with our students for either ongoing counseling or sometimes for just kind of like brief short-term counseling. It's something that a lot of our students take advantage of. There are obviously folks who come to college already having been like seeing a counselor, maybe even with a mental health diagnosis that they're managing. And we have people in our kind of roster of counselors who can help with that. But there's also a lot of students that end up turning to counseling because of the stuff I was talking about before. They're homesick or they're adjusting to new things. Maybe they were in a like dating relationship with someone from high school or someone from home and they've broken up, or they're struggling with something in their family or gender identity or whatever. There's all kinds of different reasons. We do try our best to make mental health counseling as accessible to our students as possible. And so a lot of students end up, first coming to me and kind of saying like, hey, I heard there's counseling. How do I get in on that? And so I'm happy to refer people and let them know how they can access it. It is confidential. So unless you come to me as a student and say, I am seeing so-and-so for counseling, I don't know about it, and neither does anyone else at the college, or your parents. Shout out to the parents. So it is confidential, and it is a great resource because it's an objective person who you can talk to privately and know that they're going to keep it to themselves, and they have skills and abilities to help you strategize and help you figure out how to build your own skills to cope with things. And that's, I think, a really good reason that college students, or really anyone, can use mental health counseling. So.
Very true. Thanks, Beth. We have a question. Is there a curfew at Olin?
This is my favorite question, and we get it every year. No. The quick answer is no. The bigger part of that is Olin is a college where our goal and our job is to help you become the amazing adults that you want to be in the world. And we are not going to be your mom or dad. We will be here as a support system, and we will be here to help you. But we're not checking beds, and we're not doing curfew. Once you have decided to come to our campus, we respect you as an adult and anticipate and hope that you will make adult decisions. And one of those includes knowing when to go to your room and go to bed for what is right for you. So no curfew.
Wonderful. So where are quiet spaces to study on campus? I think, in retort to talking about how our library isn't traditional, where within the library or on the campus can people go if they want that quiet study space, would you say?
The library does have a large quiet study room, a reading room. It also has a couple of smaller quiet study rooms in it. In addition to that, the res halls have team rooms, which are quiet study spaces that have tables in them that can hold maybe up to 6 or 8 people with dry erase boards in them. So you can either work yourself in there or work with your friends. But the other place is really your room. We try, especially for our first years, we have 2 people in a room as opposed to a bigger suite. So that can be a quiet study space for you. But students will really find all kinds of different places that are the right space for them. We also see a lot of students on the nicer weather studying out in the middle of the field because the truth of the matter is we are a campus of 350 people, and there's a lot of quiet spaces on our campus. When you're walking around, we don't have the hustle and bustle of 10,000 people wandering around campus. When people are in class, it's pretty quiet between classes. And so if you have an open period, you might be able to sit in the oval or sit in the great lawn or find another spot under a tree. But there's also spaces within all of the buildings where you can find a spot to pull up and study.
Wonderful. So you brought up roommates. Sticking on that topic, how do you assign roommates at Olin?
First year students will fill out a housing form, and it will have all kinds of information about who you are and what your interests are and what you like and what you're passionate about. And we actually do it by hand. We do it the old-fashioned way at Olin because we want to be sure that we're looking at the details. And so we take all of those with a freshman class of only in the mid-80s usually. I usually take a couple of days and I take all of those forms and I sit down, sometimes with another staff member, and we read through every single one of them very carefully. And I will lay them out on my living room floor right behind me actually. And I start matching people up and I start moving it around and I start trying to find the best pairs we can find. And then when you're an upper class student, when you're a sophomore and up, you pick your own roommates. So you will select who you want to live with moving as an older student on campus.
Great. We do have about 9 minutes left and 2 or so questions. We have time for more, so I encourage in this final burst of time to continue to ask questions in the Q&A, but we will move on to the next question. Do you offer ADHD learning difference coaching?
The short answer to that is no, but I'll expand on that a little bit. The staff member who does handle disability accommodations also does academic support work with students. So there is some support through that function, but I would not call it true like ADHD executive functioning coaching. That's something that if a student needs it, they would need to seek that outside of the college. If they're looking for like a true like one-to-one coach situation.
Wonderful. So the last question we have is actually geared more towards classes. So I don't know if our panelists are going to feel comfortable answering this, but I thought I would throw it out there. What are some of the most popular campuses on popular classes on campus? This is all staff, so I'm not sure we're all going to be able to answer, but I figured I would throw it out to the group if anyone had thoughts, feelings.
I am not sure we are the best ones to answer that.
Yeah.
And I say that because, you know, while we definitely work with our faculty, we're the student life team. And what that really means, I know we talked a little bit about each of our jobs individually, is that we do the co-curricular. So everything outside of the classroom to help you live your life and be supported just as a human who is also a student. But we are the group that is actually, we're probably like one of the only groups on campus that is not directly focused on classes in your academic schedule per se, because our focus is on all the other parts of your life and helping support you in those.
We have another academic question that I think I can answer correctly, and you all can tell me if I'm wrong. How many classes do first-year students take? And the answer is 4, at least for the first semester. Do I got it right? Yeah? Cool. It's 4. The admission counselor knows it. Does anyone have any other questions? We have about 5 minutes, so we have plenty of time. If you have any final burning questions, we are more than happy to answer. I don't know if our panelists have anything additional that they wanted to elaborate on that didn't get touched upon either. Okay, how long are the classes? Is it 1 to 2 hours?
I think most class sections are 2 hours, I believe, at Olin. Although I will say I am more aware of class sections this year because of trying to navigate the COVID calendar. And I know that it has changed a little bit this year. So I don't know what it will be next year. I could be completely wrong on this. I think right now most classes are twice a week for 2 hours.
I am
more information, correct me.
I'm surprised we didn't get this question, but what is campus life currently like in the COVID world? I'll ask that one to the group, if you're okay answering.
It's different than it usually is. I'm sure you're all shocked to hear that. We have this year a little over 100 students living on campus, which obviously is quite a bit fewer than, that's about 1/3 of the normal population, typical population. We also have our students organized into small household groups with whom they do most of their academic group work or all of their academic group work. And also it's sort of a group that they can do more socializing with in a less restricted way. We have policies on campus around wearing masks and physical distancing. We are doing asymptomatic COVID testing of folks who are on campus, students and employees. So it's quite a bit different. It's quieter. We're working to create opportunities for students to get together outdoors as much as possible, particularly while the weather holds here in New England, to try to encourage connection and kind of giving people a chance to see folks outside of their household group. But it is quite different. And I think that it has, and Seth, you might know more about this than me, and I might be wrong, but I think it has definitely created a very close-knit first-year class. I think that because the majority of our upperclassmen are not living on campus this year, there's a little bit less connection between the first years and the upper class students than there normally would be, which is unfortunate, but we are, we worked really hard over the summer to create a plan that would allow anyone to be on campus in a safe environment. And this is something that thus far, knock on wood, is going quite well. And so, while this is not an ideal scenario, and I think you'd be hard pressed to find any college that feels like this is an ideal scenario, it's something that I think is working well within the confines of sort of how we have to do things to be safe. And I'm pleased that we're able to have the majority of our first year class on campus, because I think it's a good experience overall. But yeah, anyone else want to say more about that?
I can add a little. We have 72 of our 86 first years on campus, and they're in 9 household groups. So they're in groups of like 7 to 10 folks, and they really are getting to know each other well in their groups, but also interacting in Zoom and other ways, and outside, socially distanced with masks and whatnot. The other thing I will gladly brag about, you see a lot of things in the news about how different campuses are handling it or not handling it. We've had 0 student cases. So our students have been here since the very beginning of September. We're a month and a half in, and we've had 0 student cases on our campus, which we are very proud of. We've definitely had to put some restrictions in place and had to be a little more cautious. And we've had to ask our students to really step up and take responsibility for their choices, and to not risk themselves or others in the process, and it's worked. Dining has been phenomenal. Our dining service is doing a great job. We have socially distanced seating or household group seating in the dining hall, but students are also able to do takeout. When students arrived on campus, we did a quarantine, and we did meal delivery to everybody's door for the first 2 weeks of arrival on campus. So we've really stepped up every level of what we're doing to try to support our students and make it a good opportunity and a good option, or as best it can be given the times.
Really quick last question, I think this would be directed to you, Seth, that we got, is how are project teams and other extracurriculars and activities changed during COVID?
The project teams specifically have definitely changed a lot, mostly because a lot of our upper class students who are leads on those teams aren't on campus. And so while a lot of them are doing theoretical work right now, there's not as much physical building. I will say some of our project teams, some of our students who are on project teams who are upper class students have actually elected to live together off campus in their own bubble households. And we were just coordinating earlier today on how to get some of them equipment and tools so they can do some building where they're staying. So we are still working with our students that are off-site to be able to support them to be part of these things, and to get new students integrated virtually through Zoom as much as we can. I'll be honest, our biggest struggle with any building and constructing right now is that our shop access has been limited because of COVID. The ability to, number one, train people safely in the shop is pretty much non-existent, because we can't have those who are trained to train within 6 feet close up next to somebody. And for example, using a bandsaw is not something you can train from 6 feet away. And so we really have had to limit some of those things this year. But we are bit by bit looking at each thing and trying to figure out when we're going to be able to start dialing things back in an appropriate spectrum, so we can get people into these spaces in a way that still maintains the safety for our students. That's really the key.
Thank you. And this actually brings us perfectly to the top of the hour. So I want to thank everyone for being here. I also want to thank our wonderful panelists. Thank you, Seth, Courtney, Beth, and Stephanie. You all did amazing, and I'm so happy, and the students themselves are glad that you took time out of your evenings in order to talk more about student affairs. Have a great night, everyone.
Good night,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye, folks. Thank you, panelists. you are all free to go. I appreciate and OFA appreciates you being here. It means a lot.
Glad to do it. It was fun. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Tori.
Thanks,
Bye,
Tori.
everyone.
Take care. Have a good evening.
You too. You too.